well. Do we do reflex tests? Y'all know reflex hammers, reflex test? If we look at all of the tests that we do, reflex hammers, pneumoencephalography, angiograms, CTs, MRIs, xenons, PET scans, if we look at all those guys, where do we get the most amount of information from which one of those tests? A little 99-cent
Reflex test.
reflex hammer gives you the most information. It gives you the least specific information. But if we think about it, if we take a reflex hammer and we set a patient on a chair and we whack that patella tendon, and that leg goes like that, what did that tell us? This guy was fed by L4, L5, right? Bottom one. So that sensation going up to the cord, so is sensory good? That motor information is going to jump over and go down the ventral side, back down to these quads. So is motor good? Boy, that means that everything from here down to there is functioning on that side. Is that a lot of information? Tremendous amount of information. Now let's suppose that we do that and nothing happens. And we say, oh shit. And we go get us a straight pin and we jam it in there and nothing happens. Are those reflexes? Now we've lost all of this. Does that tell us we're in trouble? Or does it tell us where the lesion is? It gives us the most information, but the least specific. So if we got this, then we got to start, okay, we need to get CT and MRI, xenon, start looking for it more specific. You with me? But you get the most information from just a plain little reflex hammer. All of those are diagnostic tests. All of them. Reflex hammers, angiograms, CTs, MRI, PET scans, all of them are diagnostic. Some developmental aspects. Yeah, dang, we're almost done, y'all. Some developmental aspects. CP, cerebral palsy. Y'all know cerebral palsy? Cerebral palsy is caused by the loss of oxygen either during or just before birth. We lose the oxygen in there, so the brain tissue dies. Most patients, can CP patients vary dramatically with their symptoms? Which ones have symptoms? Most of them lose motor. And they keep their sensory really well, but they lose motor. Had a first cousin that was a CP patient, and he stayed over at ARC Gateway over on Fairfield Drive. And my wife had the hardest time because of him. For years, we went to the annual banquet thing, you know, where you make a donation and you get a dinner and you see all the kids. My wife had the hardest time because she had a tendency to think because he had CP, he lost sensation. But his sensation and his brain function was good. He lost motor. And vocal folds are motor function, okay? And so he couldn't, you know, he couldn't talk. And my wife was the world worst. She said, come on, how are you today? And I said, Cindy, ain't nothing wrong with Leslie's hearing. Ain't nothing wrong with his brain. But when you ask him a question, you know, I said, quit doing that. How you doing, Les? You know, that's about all he could do. But they lose motor. They don't usually lose mental capacity. Now some, depending on how much oxygen is depleted, some of them do lose more than others. But the vast majority of them lose motor first. Now, CP caused by loss of oxygen to the nervous system during birth or shortly after. Encephaly. What is encephaly? Brain did not develop. And boy, that's changed in the last few years. They used to think that if a person had encephaly, they would live a couple of years and die because of just shut down of all the other organs. There's a young lady that lives in New England, Maine or somewhere up there, and she's in her late 30s now. And she was born without one side of her brain. It was a hemiplegia. Can't remember the word. Had half a brain. She actually lived, and now she has grown a new side. And it has drastically changed the way neurologists treat people with anencephaly. Because if she can do it, can others. She is probably the most evaluated person in the United States. She grew it. She was born without one half, and it actually developed the other half. It's not near as big, but we have one side's dominant and one side's not. So she's not by any means normal, but she's alive and she's functional. So it's changed the way we think about anencephaly. Used to, we kind of just pushed them in the corner and didn't take care of them and let them perish.
Well, to bring it over, like those, Ben Carson separated those.
Say again?
When Ben Carson separated the conjoined twins, they
Yes.
were the girl full function, and he like cut the brain in half.
And man, you talk about delicate. I really, 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 really like Ben Carson, but he has a tendency to brag about that. If I did that, the whole frickin' world would know that I did that. I'm not knocking off Ben Carson, but long time, like 24, 30 hours in surgery, sometimes on those really bad ones like that, they'll do parts today and parts tomorrow and parts the next day, because it's really entailed, those conjoined twins, especially the ones that are joined at the head. Okay. Spina bifida. Spina bifida. Spina bifida, a really cool disease. Spina bifida comes when the posterior elements, and it's usually L4, L5, and S1, the posterior elements don't form and grow together. We have some ossification centers back there, and what happens is the cord is in the back, and the posterior elements of the spine don't grow together and form the canal for the spinal cord, and so it's open. And the really bad ones be open. They vary. Sometimes the posterior elements grow like that, and there'll just be a little tiny spot that's open. Sometimes they don't go around at all, and the cord is open to the skin, and it will adhere to the skin. And those guys are really bad. The people that have the really, really, really bad ones don't make it in mid-20s. Rarely do they get to mid-20s, because as an infant, our cord goes down all the way down to the sacrum, and as we grow, the cord pulls back up in. The cord doesn't grow as fast as the patient does, and so the cord pulls up inside all the way up to L1, L2 by the time they're an adult. If that skin adheres to it, then the skin gets pulled into that little tube, and then it begins to rot and decay, and then they don't have any lower limb function, and they can't stand up, and they can't move. And so then what happens to the body when we can't move? Everything goes to pot, without movement. The kidneys then shut them down, and by mid-20s they usually stop. There are lots of them that just have a little smaller opening in the back, and the skin doesn't adhere. And a lot of sports players, so we did a lot of research back in the 70s with football players, and for years we made psychological invalids out of people with spina bifida, because we thought that they were too weak to get the job done. And we would find it sometime in a guy that was getting out of the NFL. He'd been playing for years and didn't even know he had it. And so they stopped doing that. But with spina bifida, there's always, well, it's not always. Have you ever seen some of these y'all know those snowbirds that come down here in the wintertime? And they're built like me, and they wear a Speedo. You've seen some of those? It's called overlap, Have you ever noticed one of those guys, and when he walks away, there'll be a little tuft of long, curly black hair right at his belt line back there? You ever notice that?
No.
It is a pathognomonic sign Y'all know that term, pathognomonic sign? Pathognomonic sign means that if you have this, you have that, okay? Not everybody that has spina bifida has that little curly black hair back there, but if they have it, they have spina bifida. And you can always tell, because a guy will be in his Speedo walking down the beach, you can see that little tuft of long curly black hair, and you say, how bad is your spina bifida? How'd you know I have spina bifida? You've got curly black hair coming out of the back of your ass, you know. It doesn't interfere with anything, but it's a dead giveaway that it's there. Not everybody has it, but if they have it, it's a spina bifida. Spina bifida. Lots of varying degrees, some really bad, some not so bad. The really bad ones don't live real long because they lose function of the legs. Hydrocephalus, overproduction of this cerebrospinal fluid causes pressure on the brain. And the little kid's head just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it gets kind of cone-shaped as it enlarges. I think in your PowerPoints, don't you guys have a picture of a little kid with hydrocephalus? Is there not one in there? It's in the book? Okay, it's in the book. There was a little kid down in Crestview, and his mama and his aunt got arrested and taken to jail because they pushed this little kid into a drawer of a chest of drawers and did not take care of him, and he was screaming and screaming and screaming and screaming and screaming. And the police came and arrested them. And I will never, it's only been a year or two ago, and I remember that they showed a picture of the police guy bringing this little kid out. And he had that typical hydrocephalus shaped head. And I thought to myself, there's no reason for them to have done that and neglected that little kid. But can you understand a little kid this big with hydrocephalus, all that pressure in his brain? Is he screaming 24 hours a day because of his head hurting? Can we only take so much screaming 24 hours a day? Not to justify what they did. If you got a kid like that and you can't handle him, what do?
Take him somewhere.
You take his little ass to a hospital. There's not a hospital in the world that can turn him away. The federal government will take away their Medicare money if they do. They have to take him. They have to take him. So take him to the hospital. They can fix him. They go in there and make a little surgery, and they put a little plastic shunt to let that cerebrospinal fluid come out, and they take it down to their stomach. Let it drip into the stomach. It's a filtrate of plasma. So it just, and everything relieves. If it's successful, which most of them are, they have to do it again 2 or 3 times as he grows. You know, short one to start with, and longer one, longer one, longer one. But it's really, really, really successful. And most of them live really good lives after they get over the initial onset of it. Hydrocephalus. Okay, aging in our nervous system. What happens with age? Yeah.
Everything goes to pot.
Everything holds together, the textbook says, until about age 70. By age 70, they say you've got about a 5% loss and some true senility shows up. I'm 71, so if I get lost out there on the sidewalk, y'all point me in the right direction. Do all people, is that like fixed in stone?
No.
No, there's some people that are 80s and 90s that are just sharp as a tack. And some people in their 60s, you know, can't find their way around. So age, everything goes to pot with age. Everything goes to pot with age. Everything goes to pot with age. All right, that brings us to the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system, and we have 5 minutes. Y'all want to start it? No. I didn't think so. Okay, next time we're going to start peripheral. Remember, next week, no class, spring break. Then the next time, your cranial nerve exam is due. Okay, so you got 2 weeks to do your cranial nerve exam. Y'all good?
This thing?
Nope, that's it. All right, whoa. This is discussion question for next test. Spinal nerve exam, cranial nerve exam is your own. Find out what those 12 cranial nerves are and tell me how you would examine them
So we need
without the patient knowing.
We need to write this down on the tip.
From here,
From here.
formation, circulation, and resorption.